Hi everyone, my name is Shazia Khan and I am the head of law for UK Varsity. I've been teaching law on the undergraduate programmes and postgraduate law programmes for the last 16 years at a variety of different institutions. I have a wide range of experience practicing law and dealing with client cases and representing clients at court. I've got a degree in international law and a master's in European law and also a postgraduate certificate in education. We will be now looking at legal terminology and communication unit, and we'll be looking at the key terminology today, and we'll also be looking at the learning outcomes, which is to understand, firstly, the first learning outcome is learning outcome 1, which is to know how organisations working in the legal sector communicate. We'll look at the importance of communication within the legal sector too. So the learning objectives: describe communication models and systems used in organisations working in the legal sector. Describe the methods used and benefits of both informal and formal communication systems. To outline the principles of effective communication. 1.1. Describe communication models and systems used in organisations working in the legal sector. What is communication? It's derived from the Latin word communis, meaning to share. Communication is the exchange of thoughts, messages, or information by speech, visuals, writing, or behaviour. It is the transmission of an idea or feeling so that the sender and receiver share the same understanding. It's simply the act of transferring information from one place, person, or a group to another. The transmission of the message from the sender to recipient can be affected by a huge range of things. These include our emotions, the cultural situation, the medium used to communicate, and even our location. The complexity is why good communication skills are considered so desirable by employers around the world. Their accuracy, effectiveness, unambiguous communication is extremely hard. Legal communication. Now, in this caption, it identified that there is a legal document and someone has stated, you don't call this a legal document, do you? And he said, I can understand every word of it. Legal communication is concerned with employees having the understanding to not violate ethics, standards, and laws pertaining to business communications. Legal communication also occurs both in adversarial and transactional contexts required to achieve the legal goals of making, for example, a will, negotiating a contract, or offering to buy property. However, if challenged, these are other transactions will require legal proceedings either to implement or undo them. Communication is an art rather than a science, and effective communication skills are essential to law practitioners. Writing letters of advice and emails, attending meetings, representing clients in court, or briefing barristers. However, effective communication with clients isn't something that most lawyers give much thought. And this tends to start in law school, where the focus tends to be on substantive law and legal theory. Verbal communication. Oral. In oral communication, spoken words are used, which includes face-to-face conversation, speeches, telephonic conversations, etc. Verbal communication is the use of words to share information with other people. It can therefore include both spoken and written communication. However, many people use them to describe only spoken communication. The verbal element of communication is all about the words that they choose and how they are heard and how they are interpreted. Some advantages of verbal communication is less expensive. It saves time, personal contact. It's useful in difficult situations. It's quite persuasive, and it's immediate decision and feedback. The limitations are that it's not possible every time. It may not always be considered formal. It's unsuitable for lengthy matters. There's no legal validity unless recorded, and it cannot be kept for future reference. So we've got verbal communication in written communication. This communication includes emails, letters, official memos, official notifications, and legal notices. And the advantages and disadvantages of that are, firstly, the advantages, it's an official version, it's easy to preserve, accurate presentation, it's used as a reference, it's easy verification, no opportunity to misinterpret. And then you've got the limitations, which are time consuming, again, requires skills, delay in response, decisions. It's expensive and complex to keep records. It's less personal, and it's less secrecy and confidentiality. Characteristics of verbal communication. Consider the objective. If secret, consider oral communication. If record is to be maintained, consider written communication. Avoid vagueness. In legal communication, be relevant and include all the background information. Avoid unnecessary and unrelated topics. For written legal communication, stick to the standard formats. For example, notice to another party or court orders. Non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication includes all unspoken messages, both intentional and unintentional. Non-verbal communication flows through all acts of speaking or writing. In other words, non-verbal communication is a process of communication through sending and receiving wordless, mostly visual cues between people. So as we said, wordless communication, and this could be the fact that you don't speak. It's through the expression of your face. Wordless communication could be like, as the example on the picture, which is the fact that there's traffic cones, which identify when you need to stop, when you need to go, and when you need to get ready. So this is a way of looking at wordless communication. So there's no, there may not be any sort of you saying anything, but this is where it identifies that something is, they know the meaning of something. Non-verbal communication. So you've got different types of non-verbal communication. When we talk about communication, we often mean what we say, the words that we use. However, interpersonal communication is more than the explicit meaning of words and the information of a message that they convey. It also includes implicit messages, whether intentional or not, which are expressed through non-verbal behaviours. Non-verbal behaviours include facial expressions, the tone and the pitch of the voice, gestures displayed through body language, and the physical distance between the communications. These non-verbal signals can give clues and additional information and meaning over and above the spoken verbal communication. Non-verbal communication helps people to reinforce or modify what is said in words. For example, people may nod their heads vigorously when saying yes to emphasize that they agree with the other person. A shrug of the shoulders and a sad expression when saying "I'm fine, thanks" may actually imply that things are not really fine at all. Conveying information about their emotional state. Your facial expression, your tone of voice, and your body language can often tell people exactly how you feel, even if you have hardly said a word. Consider how often you have said to someone, "Are you okay? You look a bit down." We know how people feel from non-verbal communication. These are the different types of non-verbal communication. Some we've already mentioned, things like body language, eye contact, blinking, tone of voice, facial expressions, the smell, time, personal presentation, gestures, pitch of the voice, posture. If you have ever watched a couple sitting together, talking, may have noticed that they tend to mirror each other's body language. They hold their hands in similar positions, they smile at the same time, and they turn to face each other more fully. These movements reinforce their relationship. They build on their rapport and help them to feel more connected. Smiles and nods tell someone that they are listening, and that you are listening, and that you agree with what they are saying. Movement and hand gestures may include that you wish to speak. These subtle signals have given information gently but clearly. There are a number of signals that we use to tell people that we have finished speaking or that we wish to speak. An emphatic nod and firm closing of the lips indicates that we have nothing more to say. For example, making eye contact with the chair of a meeting and nodding slightly will indicate that you wish to speak. Many popular books on non-verbal communication present the topic as if it were a language that can be learned. The implication being that if the meaning of every nod, eye movement, and gesture were known, the real feelings and intentions of a person would be understood. For example, a nod of the head between colleagues in a committee meeting may mean something very different from when the same action is used to acknowledge someone across a crowded room, and again when two people are having a social conversation. Facial expressions are particularly hard to control because we cannot see ourselves to know what we are doing. We may therefore complicate communication by trying to convey one message consciously, while in fact conveying quite another unconsciously. Interpersonal communication is further complicated because it is usually not possible to interpret a gesture or expression accurately on its own. Non-verbal communication consists of a complete package of expressions, hand, eye movements and gestures and postures, which should be interpreted along with the speech. So as we mentioned earlier about wordless communication, it's by sending and receiving wordless messages to each other. It's a process, and this type of communication, as I mentioned, includes things like gestures, touch, body language, facial expressions, and eye contact. Importance of non-verbal communication. Firstly, the words is 10%. The body language is 50%, which is quite a high percentage for body language because it identifies things through body language. So your verbal communication can be identified through body language. For example, when we mentioned the nodding of the head, the face-to-face communication, tone of voice. Also, this is 40%, which can identify the way you speak, whether it's if you're angry or if you're calm. This identifies in a meeting how you speak and how you agree, if you agree with things. 1.2, describe the methods used and benefits of both informal and formal communication systems. So formal communication. A formal communication is the process of exchanging information by following the official or prescribed rules. Formal communication is a communication that flows along the lines of management or authority. Emphasis is placed on professional approach of communicating. It's accurate, legal, and authentic. Formal communication follows a hierarchical structure and chain of command. The structure is typically top-down from leaders in various departments and senior staff in organisation, which funnel down to the lower level of employees. Employees are bound to follow formal communication channels while performing their duties. The type of communication usually follows a specific set of rules and protocols that are established to ensure that clarity, accuracy, and formality are followed. Formal communication can take the form of such as official memos, letters, reports, emails, or presentation, and is typically used for important business-related matters such as official announcements, proposal, instructions, or feedback. Types of formal communication. So you've got downward communication, and this involves the flow of communication from higher to lower levels. Example, as we mentioned earlier, instructions, directions, feedback, performance appraisals. And then you've got upward communication, and this involves the flow of information from lower levels to higher levels of organizations. Examples include customer feedback, ideas for improvement, etc. Horizontal communication. This is information exchange between departments as members of coordinating their activities. An example would be payroll department asking all employees to update their residential addresses. Formal communication usually follows a specific set of rules and guidelines, as we mentioned earlier. Some of the key characteristics of formal communication are number one, professional tone. So formal communication is categorized by a professional and polite tone, and it is designed to convey information in a clear and concise manner. Predefined structure. So formal communication usually follows a predefined structure or format, such as memos, reports, or official letters, as mentioned earlier. The use of formal language. Formal communication often involves the use of formal language, which may include technical terms or jargon specific to a particular industry or profession. Formal communication tends to be impersonal, as it focuses on conveying information rather than building relationships. Also, it's an official purpose, so formal communication is designed to serve an official purpose, such as providing instructions, making requests, or conveying important announcements. Informal communication. This is communication arising outside of formal channels. This takes place to individual needs of the organization. It's implicit, spontaneous, multidimensional, and diverse. For example, interests in sport. Is oral and may be expressed even by a simple glance, sign, or silence. Informal communication at work is any type of communication that doesn't take place using the formal methods or structures in a company. It can be spoken, written, or even conveyed through gestures and body language. Unlike a one-to-one or inter-company meeting, informal communication covers the chats, notes, and asides we share with one another outside of these formal settings. Grapevine communication. Informal communication network in the organisation. Grapevine is formed by individuals and groups in an organisation. The people in the groups have something in common that links them together. Grapevine communication, as we've said, is an informal method of communication. It's form of unstructured communication. It operates through external and internal channels, assisting an organisation's growth. The grapevine gets its name from the fact that it spreads throughout the company in all directions. This holds true at all levels of authority. Situations that can activate a grapevine, including bringing in new technology, promotions, takeovers, layoffs, and so on. When employees feel compelled to share their opinions, they turn to the grapevine network, since they are unable to do so through the traditional channels of communication. During lunch breaks in the cafeteria, subordinates usually discuss their superior's attitude and behaviour with their peers. They talk about rumours about other employees being promoted or transferred. As a result, grapevine spreads like wildfire, and tracing the source of such information might be difficult at times. Grapevine generally develops due to the various reasons. One of them is that when an organisation is facing a recession, the employees sense uncertainty. Also, at times, employers do not have self-confidence, due to which they form unions. Sometimes the managers show preferential treatment and favour some employees, giving a segregated feeling to other employees. Communication flow in organisations. So you've got the president at the top, then you've got the vice president of marketing, the vice president of production, the vice president of research and development, and then the vice president of finance. And they are in charge of accounting manager, the vice president of finance. The vice president of marketing is in charge of director of sales, and the director of advertising and promotion. Then you've got the vice president of production, who's in charge of the plant manager, and then he is in charge of the line A supervisor, line B supervisor, and line C supervisor. Then you've got the director of advertising and promotion, who is in charge of the advertising manager and the e-commerce manager, and the vice president of marketing, who's in charge of the director of sales, who's in charge of the retail sales manager and the industrial sales manager. So this communication flow example, it gives you an example of downward communication, and examples of upward communication, and examples of horizontal communication. So the downward communication is between the president and the vice president of marketing, and then between the director of advertising and promotion and that advertising manager, and then between the director of sales and the retail sales manager. Then we've got examples of upward communication, which is between the president and the vice president of production, with the plant manager and line B supervisor, and then from the e-commerce manager to the director of advertising and promotion. Then you've got the examples of horizontal communication, which is from the vice president of finance to the vice president of marketing, and the director of advertising and promotion to the plant manager, and then down to line A supervisor and line C supervisor. So this identifies the communication flow in organizations. When we look at grapevine communication, it is very important because it's a practical way to send communication that ain't appropriate for formal channels. This is probably something you've seen a lot at work. Instead of using formal channels such as emails, the manager uses informal or grapevine method whenever information needs to be used fast. A grapevine provides a lot of information, thoughts, opinions, and feelings that are inaccessible to conventional communication channels, because those messages are considered confidential, or because the formal routes of communication are insufficient to disseminate them, or because they are gossip in character. The grapevine is unavoidable and helpful in situations when informal communication channels are required to meet human communication demands. There's different types of grapevine communication. Single strand chain, when information passes through a single line of people, something happens, it is eventually delivered to the intended addressee. For example, A informs B, then B informs C, then goes to D, informs him. This line goes on after a period. Most of the party concerned have received the information. Gossip channel, and this is one individual passes on information to everyone in the type of grapevine channel. And then probability chain, which is information is provided at random during the process. Who gets the information is determined by chance. Comparison between formal and informal communication. So you've got the basis for mutual relationship among members. For formal communication, it's based on formal superior-subordinate relationship. For informal communication, it's based on interpersonal contacts. The basis for nature, the formal communication is systematic and orderly, and for informal communication, it's unsystematic and erratic. The basis speed of communication. For formal communication, it is slow and time-consuming. For informal communication, it is fast and time-saving. The basis for authenticity. The formal communication is official and well-planned messages are authentic, and informal communication, unofficial and unplanned messages may not be authentic. Then the basis for contents or subject matter. For formal communication is work-related matters. For example, orders and instructions are communicated. For informal communication, its personal matters are discussed. The basis for objectives is to achieve organizational objectives and to meet personal needs and interests. (1.3) Outline the principles of effective communication. Effective communication takes place only when the listener clearly understands the message that the speaker intends to send. A speaker's message must be delivered clearly. It's very important that this message is delivered clearly for the person to understand. The listener must be an active listener, and it's applicable to both written and verbal communication. Effective communication is important for people to interact with others while expressing their needs and understanding the tasks or duties given to them. Good communication skills may also be important in certain industries, including sales, as it helps people understand the needs of a customer before they are expressing value to them. Principles of effective communication. So, principle of objective is to create awareness, to make announcement or information. Principles of understanding the receiver, so understanding the audience, what are their expectations. Principle of clarity, so there's no ambiguity in the message, and the principle of feedback, which is opportunity for suggestions. Benefits of communication. So effective communication in the diagram identifies lots of benefits. Firstly, strong decision making, more productivity, consistent in the workflow, strong business relation, better control, advanced professional image, better response from all stakeholders, and quick in problem solving. Effective workplace communication can help reduce conflict or tension at work. Most conflicts arise due to ineffective communication, tactics which lead to individuals misunderstanding what's been communicating. Misunderstandings can result in employers or other members of the organisation feeling not understood, disrespected, disregarded, or simply not performing in an expected manner. Effective communication does more than just ensure information is accurately received. It also works to connect others and keep open lines of communication between employees and other members of the organisation. This ultimately works to create better engagement between employees, which can lead to increased employee satisfaction and a healthier company culture. Ways that communication improves employee engagement include things like helps management better understand the goals and needs of employees and what motivates them, ensures employees' skills and talents are recognised and utilised, improves the connection between employees for more enjoyable work environment, and creates a better relationship between employees and management. Employees who feel connected to their work have a clear understanding of what's expected of them and are more likely to be more productive and perform efficiently. Good communication in the workplace isn't just relevant to employees, as we've mentioned, as one of the benefits. Effective communication can also directly affect clients' relation. Organizations that communicate well with their customers or clients are more likely to build a solid relationships and retain clients versus companies that don't prioritize client communication. Customers look for companies that value their relationship and keep them up to date on changes and are more loyal when they feel connected to these companies. Effective communication plays an important part in maintaining a healthy workplace culture. Many workplaces employ people of all different cultures, races, and beliefs, and conflicts will naturally arise when so many differences are present. A culture of open communication fosters a healthy and accepted environment where all employees feel equal and understood. Companies that have a good reputation in terms of communicating both internally and with clients often have a strong and positive public impression. This helps attract talent to the company and can even increase interest from different investors and banks. So barriers to effective communication. So you've got things like language barriers, you've got physical barriers, and you've got psychological barriers, and you've got cultural barriers. So there are many reasons why communication does fail sometimes, and these are some of the reasons. Barriers may lead to the message becoming distorted, and you therefore risk wasting both time or money by causing confusion and misunderstanding. Effective communication involves overcoming these barriers and conveying a clear and concise message. This diagram identifies some barriers to communication. And firstly, it's language. So sometimes the use of overcomplicated, unfamiliar, or technical terms is an issue in regards to language. Also, you could have noise barriers, you could have distractions, you could have put downs, lack of interest, disability, discomfort with the topic, distance could be a big barrier. Too many questions and other people could be barriers to effective communication. Time. And there could be things like emotional barriers and taboos. Some people may find it difficult to express their emotions, and some topics may be completely off limits or taboo. Like we said, discomfort with the topic. Taboo or difficult topics may include but are not limited to politics, religion, disabilities, mental and physical, sexuality and sex, racism, and any other opinion that may be seen as unpopular. Physical barriers to non-verbal communication can be that not being able to see the non-verbal cues, gestures, postures, and general body language can make communication less effective. Phone calls, text messages, and other communication methods that rely on technology are often less effective than face-to-face communication. People often hear what they expect to hear rather than what is actually said and jump to incorrect conclusions. Cultural barriers. Now, the norms of social interaction vary greatly in different cultures, as do the way in which emotions are expressed. For example, the concept of personal space varies between cultures and between different social settings. Language and linguistic barriers ability may act as a barrier to communication. However, even when communicating in the same language, the terminology used in a message may act as a barrier if it is not fully understood by the receiver. For example, a message that includes a lot of specialist jargon and abbreviations will not be understood by a receiver who is not familiar with the terminology. Psychological barriers. The psychological state of communicators will influence how the message is sent, received, and perceived. For example, if someone is stressed, they may be preoccupied by personal concerns and not as receptive to the message as if they were not stressed. Anger is another example of a psychological barrier to communication. When we are angry, it's easy to say things that we may later regret and also to misinterpret what others say. Psychological barriers to communication may result from the receiver's physical state. For example, a receiver with reduced hearing may not fully grasp the content of a spoken conversation, especially if there's significant background noise. Physical barriers could include things like the distance between the sender and the receiver. Communication is generally easier over shorter distances as more communication channels are available and less technology is required. Although modern technology often helps to reduce the impact of physical barriers, the advantages and disadvantages of each communication channel should be understood so that an appropriate channel can be used to overcome the physical barriers. There's also systematic barriers to communication, which may exist in structures and organizations where there are inefficient or inappropriate information systems and communication channels, or where there's a lack of understanding of the roles and responsibilities for the communication. In such organizations, people may be unclear of their role in the communication process and therefore not know what is expected of them. So we can see that there's a lot of barriers to effective communication, and these barriers are sometimes overcome, but sometimes it's difficult to overcome these barriers. But to get effective communication, you must try to overcome these barriers to try to proceed and get the business going effectively. 7 C's of effective communication. So you've got clear, which means make objective clear, so avoid complex words and phrases. Concise, which is to keep it clear and to the point. Avoid filler words and sentences. Concrete, which is be specific, not vague. Use facts and figures to support your messages. Correct, try to avoid typos. Use correct facts and figures. Use the right level of language. Coherent, does your message make sense? Is it clear? Ensure it flows logically. Avoid covering too much. Complete, so does the message contain everything it needs to? Include a call to action. And courteous, being polite builds goodwill. Ensure your message that you are sending is tactful. So now we have finished learning outcome 1 for the module legal terminology and communication. Thank you for attending this session and thank you for your patience. And the next session we will be doing will be learning outcome 2. Thank you.